Dan Orr, president of the Divers Alert Network, has been helping shape diving for more than 40 years. Born in Miami, he was in and around water from the time he could walk. Dan grew experiencing boyhood adventures at his grandparents' home in the Keys. Sea Hunt and underwater adventure movies ignited a growing interest in diving. As an adolescent, without permission, he and a friend borrowed some scuba gear and snuck into backwater Biscayne Bay, and he was hooked. Dan earned his first certification in 1964 and entered the Navy in 1966. He wanted to be a diver, but the Navy had other plans. His job duties included gun director and aircrew rescue swimmer during a tour of combat duty in Vietnam. After leaving the Navy, Dan's career in diving took off. He became a YMCA and PADI instructor, teaching his first course in 1972 for a dive center in West Carrollton, Ohio, where he was working on his degree in aquatic biology at Wright State University. Made of the right stuff, in 1973, Dan headed up the fledgling WSU scuba program, which at the time was nothing more than an idea. By the time he left in 1988, Dan had developed it into one of the largest university scuba programs with a staff of more than 40 and considered the role model for such programs nationwide. In that interval, Dan taught hundreds of divers, led dive trips. He researched and spoke on diving technique, rescue, safety, and other topics by involving himself in them. In 1977, he completed his master's in aquatic biology, meeting another graduate student named Betty in the process. In 1979, Dan was certified as a NAUI instructor by his mentor, Dr. Lee Sommers, and became a NAUI instructor trainer in 1980, which ultimately led him to being a NAUI branch manager. Going into the 1980s, Dan continued with the WSU scuba program and growing as a teacher. In the early 1980s, he met Dr. Peter Bennett, who had just founded the Divers Alert Network. Dan joined as the network's 10th member. Then, following his passion for making diving better and safer, took on the role of Dan Volunteer Regional Coordinator and Instructor, enthusiastically promoting the network. In 1988, Florida State University recruited Dan to become the new assistant director for their academic diving program, and he moved to Tallahassee to take up the position. But he didn't go alone, because in the middle of all of this, he didn't lose sight of what's really important. He and Betty married in 1986. In 1991, Dan's passion for diver safety and the Divers Alert Network landed him exactly where he belonged. That year, he accepted the position of Dan Training Coordinator, launching more than 20 years as one of the driving forces keeping the network successful, viable, and relevant. He's been Dan's Chief Operating Officer, Chief Executive Officer, and stands today as its President. During his tenure, Dan has directly implemented and overseen literally dozens of diver safety initiatives, training programs, workshops, and research projects. A long list of awards and published works and thousands of trained divers testify to a career built on the idea that you build success in diver safety or anything else on thorough preparation and applied knowledge and skill.
Dan Orr, a dynamic visionary leader with over 40 years of diving and education experience. He's no stranger to the dive industry.
Primary service from the very beginning is the diving emergency hotline. So it doesn't make any difference whether you're a member or a non-member. If you have a problem, you can pick up that phone and call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our medical department is never offline.
Today, Dan continues to travel internationally to dive, share diving, and help divers dive more safely. He says that diving still holds the same excitement and fascination as it did when, as a 9-year-old, he stuck his masked face below the surface for the first time, and his imagination ran away with him. We suspect it always will. And he's still keeping sight of what's really important by spending time with his children, Julia and Ryan, and their families. Congratulations, Dan, on a much-deserved Reaching Out Award. On behalf of the thousands of us who you brought to diving, thank you. On behalf of the millions of us who dive more safely because of you, somehow saying thank you seems inadequate. But thank you.